town, 'cause I'm starving for affection. Haven't eaten weeks, if you know what I mean. Where else to go but the local meat market? Walk into T-Bone's bar to check out the scene. They got pulled pork and short skirt steaks, but the only piece of meat a country boy needs is brisket. Make sure the temperature's right, we can cook something up tonight. Shimmy shake right onto my plate. Grab the beer and sauce, let's marinate and smoke it up all night. Girl, give me a taste of that brisket.
All right, so it's around midnight, and I am going to go ahead and start prepping the brisket. The first thing we need to do is we need to trim all the fat, the excess fat off of the top. You can leave the fat cap on the bottom. As a matter of fact, you should leave the fat cap on the bottom to insulate from the heat, but rub will not penetrate fat. So we want to go ahead and trim any excess fat off of the top of the brisket. This brisket came pretty well trimmed. The last one I got from Black Canyon, which also turned out really well, almost needed no trimming at all. This one needs a little bit more, but not much. They really do a good job. The ones that I've gotten so far from them have been really good. Once the fat is trimmed, we'll then go ahead and inject it before we put it back in the fridge. The injection itself is made from a product called Better Than Bullion. Go ahead and add basically a teaspoon of this to water, boil it up, let it cool back down, and then go ahead and use your injector to inject it into the meat. So our goal here is to basically inject with the grain. We're trying to, obviously make sure that not only is the meat itself extremely moist, right? Brisket's difficult to cook and keep moist, but we also want to make sure that we're enhancing the flavor, but basically with, that good beef flavor. I typically am not really trying to change the flavor of a brisket. I like the kind of Texas style, more or less a salt and pepper rub, but a lot of people call it Dalmatian rub, with that kind of that rich beef flavor. So that's why I use something like this to just enhance the flavor. I'm not really trying to change the flavor at all. Once the injection is complete, I'll go ahead and cover it and put it back in the fridge for 5 hours. I'll pull it and let it slowly warm up for a couple of hours, and then start prepping the smoker, during that time, and then we'll get some rub on it as well. Okay, so it is about 6:30 in the morning. The brisket's been sitting out of the fridge for about an hour and a half, and it's time to get the smoker ready. But you've seen me do that before, so we'll go really fast. I'm using hickory wood chunks and pecan wood chunks for the smoke today. Okay, so we're back inside and we're going to prepare the rub. This is going to be we'll call it a more beef-centric variation on the rub that I like to make for most of my barbecue. True Texas style brisket, the rub is almost exclusively salt and pepper. You may see recipes out there that add a little bit of other things like garlic, maybe a little bit of chipotle pepper powder to kind of spice it up. So I make mine, like I said, it's just a variation. Start with a 1/4 cup of kosher salt. Then I'm going to go ahead and add maybe we'll call it 1/8 of a cup of coarse ground black pepper. That's the part of the recipe that I just haven't quite got, for at least my taste, perfect yet. I feel like there's just a little too much black pepper in the rub so far, so you may want to try a little less of that. I still put onion powder in the rub. I put onion powder in all my rubs. I really like the way it enhances the flavor. Not much here though. You can see using a small 1/2 tablespoon there, We'll go ahead and add a little bit of garlic, put a little bit of the chipotle pepper, and reality, if I'm serving a large crowd that can't handle much spice, I'll go ahead and make that a very small amount. We'll add a little bit of chili powder in there. And I do put a little bit of the raw sugar cane that I use in there. Not much. I don't want to, I don't want anybody to be able to really detect the sweetness in the rub, but that really helps it bark up. You get that really good bark. I've tried a couple of different variants to try to get good bark, and I was really happy with this. I did reapply it after when I wrapped it, as you guys will see in the video, but I was really happy. The bark came out well. The flavor profile was close. I said it wasn't right where I wanted it to be, but it was really close. Like I said, I think a little less black pepper, maybe in the rub that I reapply. Maybe I wouldn't change this rub, but maybe when I do the reapplication, I might have gone with a little less black pepper, and it would have come out just about perfect. Okay, so I'm removing it from the pan where it sat with the injection and everything to put it in a drier pan for applying the rub. It's also a slightly larger, it's basically just a baking sheet, slightly larger pan to make less of a mess. As you guys have seen in the past in the other videos, I often like to work in the sink itself to kind of keep the mess to a minimum. But this thing is so large, it just doesn't quite fit. As a matter of fact, it barely fits on the smoker. So I'm looking to apply a good coating of the rub, not crazy thick, but you do definitely want the meat itself to be coated in the rub. In some instances, you see a lot of people kind of pat it down. I'm still on the fence about the way I apply rubs, trying to make sure I get the perfect amount of rub every time. In some cases, depending on the type of meat, I might pick it up and shake it off if I've used something to kind of stick the rub on. Like when I am applying rub to my chicken or something like that. In this case, I'm not going to be picking this thing up and shaking it off. So looking to make sure that there's good coverage there. I know that I'm going to be reapplying the rub when I wrap it and put it back on the smoke to really give it that good bark. So this part of the rub is really what's going to enhance the flavor of the meat itself. So at this point, we should be ready to go ahead and assemble the smoker. And for a long cook like this, where you're trying to maintain temp, I want to have more than just a chimney worth of charcoal. I like to put a ring of charcoal itself around the outside edge. I'll throw a few extra chunks of wood in there. Then I'll dump the charcoal on top of the ring of unlit charcoal and wood, and it will slowly ignite, and it'll give you a nice longer burn. Maintain temperature pretty well. I have been able to do cooks without adding charcoal in this way that have lasted 9-10 hours before. So this was a suggestion I read online, and I thought I read many suggestions online. This is the one that I found to be most effective. So I get everything kind of nice and even there, and then I'm going to go ahead and assemble the smoker. So with the smoker coming up to temperature, let's talk about the smoke itself. The smoke that comes out of it right when it's assembled is excessive, really, but it still should be pretty clean. You can see there the smoke is very white, right? It's not gray. There's no darkness to it. There's no creosote being burned. I typically let everything fully ignite and assemble the smoker pretty hot. I'm still looking for it to die down a little bit, so there's not quite so much smoke coming out before I place the meat on there. You don't want to over smoke something, and of course with brisket you want to be particularly careful. You want that smoke flavor in there, but you definitely don't want to be tasting creosote with your beef. So the temperature I'm looking for when I'm smoking brisket is about 300 degrees for the first couple of hours. Myron Mixon calls it smoking it hot and fast. And I definitely have been pleased with utilizing that school of thought. A lot of people like to go low and slow and smoke at something closer to 225. That definitely lengthens the time of your smoke, and it's a lot of maintenance, obviously, to work with something that long. And the argument that when you do it hot and fast, you're going to dry it out, I just haven't seen that so far. So I've added some wood chips to kind of ignite the fire, get it burning nice and hot. I'll let it get up, we're looking at about 325, then I'll go ahead and assemble the smoker, and that temperature will typically come down to about 300 degrees, which is what I'm looking for. So here we can see, that it is at 300 degrees. We'll check again an hour later. We'll see that it's maintaining temperature in a really nice way. It's a little cool outside, a little windy, but it's still maintaining temp pretty well. So at an hour and a half in, we take a look. The temperatures come down a little bit, but that's okay. Water's boiling. The meat looks incredibly moist. We can definitely see that the smoke is getting in there. At this point, it's looking really good. Okay, we're going to go ahead and pull the brisket off of the smoker at 2 hours. Everything looks great so far. The bark is starting to come up. You can really see that the smoke is taking to the meat itself. I use insulated gloves, definitely a must. And the goal here is to go ahead and get this thing wrapped in tin foil to help it through the stall. As the fat renders off of the meat, it cools the outside of the meat, and you can see certain cuts of meat in a smoker stall at a particular temperature. With brisket, it's often around 180, and it can sit there for hours. By wrapping it, sealing it up in its own heat, that really helps what sometimes they refer to as powering through the stall. And so that's definitely something that I do. I find it to be very effective. This particular brisket actually cooked an hour faster than I had anticipated. So I'm reapplying the rub, and as I mentioned earlier, this is basically leftover from the original mix. And I think if I was to do this again, I would go ahead and dump out the old and make a less, just a little less black pepper in the rub that I reapplied. I'd go ahead and cut that down a little bit, and I think that would really have just about made this perfect. My favorite briskets that I've had have always been in Texas. I've had some fantastic brisket down in Austin, and that's what I'm kind of always comparing it to. And so that's what I'm going for, that Texas flavor profile. And like I said, a little too much pepper, I think, in the reapplication of the rub. But it did give me great bark. And like I said, it was very, very close. I don't want to imply the brisket was not good. It was fantastic. But I'm always looking to kind of to get it exactly what I'm looking for, and it was just a touch off. I'm going to use extra tin foil to make sure this thing is sealed up really well. Like I said, the goal here once again is to keep that heat in and power this thing through the stall. Put it back on the smoker. I was expecting another 3 hours or so of cooking time, and it was actually up to temp in 2. All right, so you can see here the temperature's at 205. Anywhere from 202 to 205 is great. You can check around the different places in the meat to see where the the temperature hits. But that's what you're looking for. I was glad I checked the temperature when I did. I literally was expecting it to take another hour to cook, but I went ahead and immediately pulled it off of the smoker and let it rest. And we're going to let it rest under a couple of thick towels is what I used. A blanket will do for a couple of hours to cook in its own heat. All right, so a couple of hours have passed. We're going to go ahead and unwrap this thing, see what we've got. There's an incredible amount of juice and everything, au jus, down at the bottom of the tin foil, so I know that it looks like we've got great moisture and everything there. The bark looks great. Just really pleased with the appearance of it. I want to go ahead and cut into it. It should cut incredibly easily. What you're looking for is to be able to, well, from the standpoint of competition, you're looking for a thin slice of brisket that you can pick it up and hold it with your fingers and it not fall apart. But then if you grab it with your fingers on either end and pull it, it should pull apart easily is kind of what you're looking for. Basically for consumption at the party that I'm smoking this for tonight, I'm not worried about doing things like burnt ends, but separating the point from the flat would be something that you would have done before you let it rest, and you would have put the point back on the smoker to make burnt ends. At some point I'll go through that part of a competition cook, but this is just for serving brisket at a party. You know, I make a small cut there, and I'm looking at it. There's great smoke to it, great smoke ring. I was really pleased. Then went ahead and made a larger cut to really get a look at the way that the way the brisket came out. You can see there, it's cutting extremely easy. As a matter of fact, if I'm not careful, it's even falling apart. As I push that aside, you can see that great smoke ring. The color is consistent. It really came out well. All right, guys, so with a little extra time, I went ahead and added smoked corn on the cob to the menu. The brisket came out over an hour early, and I wasn't expecting guests for a while, so I went ahead and took the corn on the cob, applied some sea salt. Actually, that's Himalayan pink salt. It's actually very good. Coarse ground pepper, and then a little bit of squirt butter. And then wrap it up in the tin foil a little loosely. I'm not looking for it to be really, really tight. I want it to seal in the flavor, but I do want a little bit of the smoke to get in there. And then you go ahead and throw the corn on the cob on the smoker for a couple of hours. If the smoker's running 275, 250, 225, doesn't really matter. After a couple of hours, you pull that off, set it aside, unwrap it right before you're about to put it on the plate. It comes out really, really well. You get a little bit of smoke flavor in there. The squirt butter really makes it almost taste like popcorn on the cob instead of corn on the cob. Well, that's it for this episode of The Smoke Life. Hopefully that helped some of you guys out, especially my friends down there in South Florida. You guys take care.
Walk into T-Bone's bar to check out the scene. They got pulled pork and short skirt steaks, but the only piece of meat a country boy needs is brisket. Make sure the temperature's right. We can cook something up tonight. Shimmy, shake.